To welcome our next speaker, Dr. Michelle Maloney, who is the National Convenor of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, and is actually out of four and a half days of running a really fantastic event that some of you may have attended, the New Economy Network Association of Australia's second conference. And she's going to be talking, I think, a bit, or kind of giving some reflections on the network and what maybe also the conference and what it's trying to do. So thanks very much.
Can you click for me? Thank you very much. It's very lovely to have been invited, and thank you, Christopher and Nicole, for your awesome papers. I've been reflecting on both the words you've been using about describing the corporate agenda and also the trickster, and I think both of these issues are relevant to the last few days we've just had. Oh, good. I'm glad I asked you to do that because I don't think I have the mental capacity. So, yes, that works. I actually asked for 15 minutes, not 20, because I thought I might not be coherent after that. I know if anyone's organised an event, one knows how exhausted one gets, but it's been awesome and fun. I was really delighted to be able to call my paper Alternative Economic Imaginaries, because I thought that was a nice response to these corporate myth-making ideas about our future. And so what I'll be doing is just giving you a really brief and quite a practical overview of some of the things that have been discussed and some of the things we're working towards, but perhaps weaving back in some of these notions of the trickster, because it's kind of appealing to me in the terms of the fluid, nimble responses that some of the civil society groups are already engaged in, and that the New Economy Network, as the beginning of a lot of folks coming together, have been playing with those ideas. Oh, it's touchy. So I won't talk too much about the challenge. I'll move through that. I know that everyone in the room knows it, and Christopher gave a really wonderful summary of some of the big picture problems that we're facing. But I'll talk a little bit about the practicalities of the first year of this New Economy Network and what it's up to, and then a bit of a summary about what's come out of the conference. And I think from that, you'll be able to see some of the really interesting responses to what we would see as these standard corporate myths and corporate imaginaries that are still very dominant around our planet. For those who know, I'm the National Convenor of the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, and we're largely inspired, or originally inspired, by the work of Thomas Berry as a deep ecologist. One of his lovely books that actually brought together deep ecology and governance was called The Great Work, Our Way into the Future. So on Friday morning, even at the NINA conference, we framed that as, we were coming together, and may I say there were 300 people on the Friday jammed in, and there was about 350 on the Saturday. So across the whole conference, I think I've done a rough estimate, maybe somewhere between 400 and 500 organisations were represented. That's just our second effort, and it's a completely unfunded, volunteer-led beginnings of a network. So we framed our work as the great work, how we move into a future where, on the one hand, we have people that seem almost strangely excited to call it the Anthropocene, whereas the rest of us would like to fight back and either reclaim the Holocene, or I think the lovely gentleman whose name escapes me, who framed the term solastasia, is now starting to play with another word, which is about trying to go back to a time when biodiversity was in fact richer, more plentiful, and that we're not the driving force on Earth. So I say fight the Anthropocene, but I digress already, and it's only slide 3. So the problem, we know the problem. Growth economics, the development of the kind of industrialised society that has emerged out of a whole range of factors that I will touch on in a moment, because we do a brief analysis of the kinds of issues as the New Economy Network that we have to face. Planetary boundaries, of course, and the global inequities, because although I come from a place where my primary concern is often the non-human, the New Economy Network is very much embedded in the reality of humanity as part of an interconnected community of life, but also we have to grapple with a whole range of very different takes on what the future could and should look like across inequality between humans and inequality between the human species and others. Yes, the problems are global, and yes, we're facing the Anthropocene. We don't do that in a cheerful way. We don't want to label our research under that banner. I'm not interested, don't like it, want something else, thanks. The how did we get here? This is kind of important, because what we find in our movement or our network of folks is a lot of people keep nailing neoliberalism, and it's actually really nice to take a slightly longer view, whether you go, as Derek Jensen and others do, with the more radical take on, it was really the shift into agricultural societies that saw us as land shapers and land clearers. European colonisation has been profound impact on globalisation at every stage for the last 500 years. The perfect storm, of course, was the Industrial Revolution, then blending into the Great Acceleration after the 1950s, the conflation of corporate ideas about consumer capitalism and the American way, the stuff that we saw emerging in the 1950s, which was the deliberate creation of the consumer culture. All of these issues are important because they can actually give you hope, rather than assuming that humans are nasty creatures and we've kind of come in this direction as a natural force of evolution. We can, in fact, unpick the points and the power bases and the spaces and the policies that brought us to a place where we are consuming so much of the natural world. It helps us understand that if we made it, we can unmake it. We might have left it a little late, but we'll talk about that. So neoliberalism, since the 1980s, definitely an issue that many folks, both within the Earth Laws movement, the rights of nature space, but definitely in the new economy, and I'll talk about what that means, grappling with the implication of all of these forces that have brought us to where we are today, which often feels like this. And it can be very challenging. You know, and as someone who's got the law degree, the PhD, what I'm most interested in is the grassroots and average ordinary citizen's way of trying to deal with that mess. And in a way, both AELA and NINA have been responses to the ordinary citizen's concerns of what the hell do I do? How do I become a force for good within a complicated, intricate, systems-based mess that I barely understand, and I'm not sure how to be part of the response. What we are completely in belief within the NINA network, the space, is that most of the solutions are already out there. They have been for some time, whether you take it from a philosophical worldview or you actually look at the technological responses. And we obviously don't buy into the idea that technology will save us, but there's a whole range of remarkable activities and initiatives around the planet and around Australia. There are thousands and thousands of organisations across this continent, as well as projects and initiatives, and I'll run through the kind of sectoral stuff that we're interested in, but the solutions are already here. The lovely future we'd like to have is actually already here, but it's in small pockets and small places, and what we really need to do is turn it around and join it all up. So what is the potential of alternative economics? And as I titled my little talk, is it too little too late? Short answer is possibly, but there's still an awful lot that can be done to minimise the damage that I guess that we're doing now and that will be happening in the future. So just to hone in briefly on the new economy stuff, all around the world for decades, we've had a whole range of different kind of movements or ideas. In Europe, social solidarity economy and collaborative economy are particularly used. Anyone who knows ecological economics knows that the steady state economy framing came out in the early 1970s as the kind of economic response to neoclassical economics and the theories there that are so flawed. Peer-to-peer, community-based, regenerative economy. There is a real ecosystem, a network in itself of all the ideas that are a response to whether you want to be responding to neoliberalism or the 1% or the basic structures of industrialisation. But the fundamental core goals that most of these ideas or movements address is challenging the dominant economic system, which is neoclassically formed. It's got all those lovely diagrams that Kate Raworth showed us at our conference on Friday. But most importantly, it's dominated by inequality, large-scale extractivism, and of course fossil fuels. And the other main goal then, within all of these alternative, so-called alternative economic spaces, is to create and strengthen the diverse economies that we'd like to see happen. And as I said, most of the solutions and the lovely examples are out there. We just need to identify, amplify, join them up, and keep pushing back at capitalism and the larger system. So if we ever had a bumper sticker, and that'd probably be too long for a bumper sticker, but this would be Nina's bumper sticker, to change things by fighting the existing reality, although we do and we will, to change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. As someone who kind of grew up in the environmental heyday of the 80s and watched ESD and all the other flawed models of so-called balancing the three pillars of society and such, to me, at this age, the biggest problem I see with the so-called environmental movement, which I'm part of and believe in, is that it's always been blocking and it hasn't done a lot of building. And I think what's really cool about these last maybe 5 to 10 years is just the sheer bringing together of food-related research and food systems, as well as social solidarity movements with environmentalism. This merging together almost feels like a final, and we should have done it ages ago, bringing together of the progressive movement in a way that has obviously failed over the last couple of decades. That's not to disrespect the incredible work that's gone on in the last few decades, but what's fun about NINA is that we can try to stop the bad stuff, but NINA represents trying to build the good stuff. And I think by bringing some of the folks we've had even in the last 12 months together, I've never seen anything in my life in terms of the tremendous excitement around it. It's really encouraging. So if for nothing else, we may go down, but we'll go down with a smile on our faces because we tried really hard and worked with great people. And I don't mean to be flippant, but I've never seen so much enthusiasm amongst the kinds of folks that I'm used to working with over the last few decades, who are often very gloomy. So if we ever had a logo, which we probably won't, that might be us. I kind of like this one better because the fish are cuter. But that's really what we think. I mean, if the big corporate guys at the moment actually in so-called the legal system control many of the resources and unfortunately control the ideas and the culture wars, the media, then what we have to do is get ourselves together and be the little fish that chase back. So this is really nuts and bolts, but I just want to show you this is almost, for me, it's been a unique insight into how we do this very simple building blocks of pulling together pretty amazing people. Conference in August in Sydney had 150 people last year. Bronwyn Morgan and myself thought it'd be fun to have something about social enterprise, but hey, let's call it building a new economy, because we thought new economy would bring together the ecological people and the social people and all those different types of people, because anytime you grab one of those labels, the other fellas don't want to come and play, and it seems to have worked. Over the weekend we had, like I said, more than 300 people, and Amanda Carl, who I really respect with her work on just transitions out of coal communities, said that even she was seeing people that she never thought would come into the room together, let alone play together. So from that, the basics, a core group of people came together and said, let's build. We've got a whole range of working groups that are led by quite some remarkable people, and we've got a very strong focus on First Nations people being involved and leading the way in the kinds of economic initiatives that they're involved in. Everything from the role of law and lawyers in a new economy, research and academia, looking forward to finding more tricksters, food, energy, all the usual suspects, but a whole bunch of other really amazing folks getting involved and trying to just do the work together as pretty amazingly and well-educated professionals. So there's a mix of both tertiary educated and ordinary grassroots people who really know the spaces that they work in. The mission and objectives, we're one of the few networks I know that didn't spend 3 days arguing about principles and stuff like that. We just said what we really want to do is what all the other alternative economic systems are doing, which is challenge the stuff we don't want, the corporate domination, the 1%, the large-scale extractivism, and try to build all of the smaller localised systems that we're interested in. You probably can't even read that. I forgot to put in the usual awesome egg structure, which is, ecology, society, and economy. Trying to rearrange the nested sustainability, but ecological, social, democratic and place-based emphasis, as well as First Nations aspirations. We are aiming at building a community of practice, facilitating collaboration and peer-to-peer work, which is going to be really, I think, the pivotal space for NINA, and facilitating a whole range of activities. Someone said, when are we going to advocate to government? I said, about what? There is so much work to be done that I think the basic principle of NINA is that we're just going to get on and do everything we can as citizens who have already got quite a phenomenal control over resources, ideas, energy, food cooperatives, land-based projects, ecological restoration. If and when we bump into anything of government that will be of use, and particularly when the lawyers start to pull together all those little fish with all those collected ideas, then we'll push back and do some sort of advocacy. We don't underestimate the power structures, but it really is that whole building something rather than constantly talking back at the folks who think that they're in control. Boring. The map is cool. This stuff's really important. The one thing we found, I interviewed about a dozen people, and we're going to continue interviewing. We're making a documentary early next year so that the Aussie experiences can be shared with the world, because anytime you look around for any of this, it's always European and North American, and it kind of puts my little Aussie heckles up whenever I see the absence and the spaces for our Aussie and other southern voices. We've already got about 85 different folks up there, whether they're organisations or whatever, but the big theme that came out of the days were folks feeling really excited about finding other people either in their space or working sectorally in a different area, but the kind of true solidarity and learning that they can find from finding each other. So very simple tools, and the modern platforms that we're accessing are going to help us. That is a shot of day one. You can see some amazing people like First Nations elder Mary Graham, an elder from my culture, Emeritus Professor Ian Lowe, lots of terrific and amazing people. That's the last day where we all did a bit of a wrap-up. I was just going to mention that in addition to some of the other groups, the policy development space is starting to hone in. We've got a number of folks who are really quite expert in local government and other areas, really seeing the emergence in the last 2 years, particularly since Trump, in municipalities stepping up and going, we're just going to sidestep state and federal plutocracy and do our own thing. There's a growing interest in really working at the local council level, or if that's a space for negotiation of opportunities, and that's a really nice place to start. Communications and media, really, really important. Very, very hard to challenge the culture if you don't have access to the mainstream. So there's some very interesting ideas developing there. And a lot of that stuff's hugely not that exciting for you. Anyone who's actually interested in being involved, sure, do get in touch, because what we're going to be doing is having very, completely democracy. See, I told you 15 minutes is all I could do. I need a coffee. Democratic processes for working groups and hubs to just do their own thing and then check in with each other, so that there's not like some big flash organisation. It's a true network with lots of cells of folks who can just get on with amazing stuff, but then come back to the centre whenever everyone wants to come back. So that will be fun. I thought I'd throw in a slide there for lawyers, because I do actually, as a lawyer, think that we've already got a small working group on the regulatory stuff, as well as the legal barriers to the things we want to do. But I really see this over the next, particularly the next 12 to 24 months. Hang in there, Mish, your brain's still alive. The next 2 years, where we're already hearing from a lot of people at the community level, there are barriers here within the planning laws to doing tiny houses. How do we ensure that the social equity factors around these other issues can be addressed? And as soon as people start pulling out those details, we're in a position then to draw in from our amazing networks all the cool people who can actually suggest a better way to do it. And I am in fact looking forward to the first day we knock on the door of a government agency and go, we're here to have a yarn about a whole bunch of things we'd like you to change, and there's like an army of lawyers behind me. That'd be a really nice day, and that's all I had to say, so thank you.